Some call them broncos. Others refer to them as buckaroos. And depending on who it is, they might use words such as cattlemen, cowhands, cowpokes, and cowpunchers. There are other lesser-known terms to define the characters too, such as drover, vaquero, herdsman, or stockman, with more popular phrases such as wrangler and rancher thrown in there too. Overall though, the legacy of cowboys can best be summarized through one simple descriptor: the heartbeat of the Old West. Cowboys and cowboy culture has largely dominated the conversation surrounding the Wild West and the world's lasting obsession with all things Western frontier. Thanks to the former soldier-turned-showman William Cody, or better known as Buffalo Bill, the minds of everyone were filled with dramatic representations of life out west, centering on the exploits of cowboys. The depiction worked so effortlessly as cowboys defined so much of what is now known as the American life, at least as it stood in the late 19th century before spilling into the modern age of U.S. history. Cowboys lived lives defined by hard work, community, agriculture, commerce, and maybe a sprinkle of danger thrown in, depending on where and when you were leading the life as a wrangler. To explore more about the historical context of cowboys and the men and women who represented these icons, here is the first in a series of video essays focusing on specific cowhands who symbolize the profession's significance to the story of the United States of America. First up, the legend of Nate Love, also known as Deadwood Dick and the greatest black cowboy in all of the West. Nate Love, spelled like Nat Turner but pronounced like Nate the Great, was born into enslavement on June 14, 1854. He was born on the plantation he and his family labored for, located in Davidson County, Tennessee. Robert Love was the plantation owner and was notorious for his large farms dotting his southern plantation. Due to the size, there were more than just a few enslaved folk on the property, and Nate's parents luckily held positions of higher magnitude, affording them more privileges than their fellow servants. Samson Love, Nate's birth father, was an enslaved foreman who worked out in the fields. He was in charge of managing the rest who were enslaved, and making sure each day's work was satisfactory for the big house. The big house is precisely where Nate's mother, Mahala Melissa Love, was assigned work. She was more of a jack of all trades, working both in the kitchen and waiting tables, as well as handling the loom and helping to weave garments for the rest of the house. Nate also wasn't the only child in the Love family. He had an older sister, Sally Love, born in 1846, as well as an older brother, Jordan Love, born circa 1849. When Nate was a child, he was mostly taken care of by his sister, Sally, while their mother spent most of her waking life at the big house. However, with Sally being as old as she was forced to work in the kitchen alongside Mahala. As a result, Nate learned to be independent as best as he could, mostly looking after himself. All three Love siblings benefited from Samson's position on the plantation. He was able to both read and write, even though black literacy was against Tennessee law at the time. As such, he would teach his children in secret. Nate and his siblings would learn little by little until they were able to read and write. Samson's thought was that it would give his children a better chance at success after slavery ended, a dangerous risk that undoubtedly paid off years later. In October of 1864, Andrew Johnson officially emancipated all slaves in Tennessee, as he was acting as military governor of the state. By the end of the Civil War a few months later in 1865, slavery was ending in the United States, and Nate Love and the rest of his family were freedmen once and for all. After their initial freedom, Samson and Mahala decided it was best to remain in Davidson County, Tennessee, where they would continue raising Nate and his brother Jordan. Due to Samson's long-standing relationship with the plantation owner Robert Love, Robert was willing to rent out one of his smaller farms as a sharecropping agreement. As a result, Sampson and the rest of the Love family settled on a 20-acre portion cut out from a larger tobacco and corn farm, which were the two most profitable crops at the time. With Nate being at a more work-appropriate age for the time period, he mostly tended to the garden alongside the family home. His specialties were handling sweet potatoes, turnips, and onions, while assisting his parents with anything they needed. Unfortunately, the sweetness enjoyed by the Love family post-war quickly turned bitter when Sampson Love died shortly after the first round of corn was planted. It left Mahala and her children in a tough spot, without anyone to handle the major crops. Of course, Nate couldn't let their good fortune completely go to waste, and took up much of the farming responsibilities himself. His mother and sister were quick to help out as well, but it still wasn't enough. Soon, Nate started venturing out into Davidson County to locate work on other area farms, mostly plantations utilizing the same sharecropping system as the Love plantation. Through these sporadic gigs, Nate unveiled a deeply embedded skill for breaking horses. It was something he nor anyone else around him really knew about, let alone understood. But it was inarguable for anyone who witnessed it. Nate Love was a horse whisperer, and instantly made him an invaluable worker on all the farms he worked on, both at home and abroad in Tennessee. Before too long, Nate's skills allowed him to enter various raffle drawings in and around Davidson County. On 2 separate occasions, he was the grand prize winner of a horse, all for his own taking. Each time, however, Nate turned around and sold the horse right back to the owners. He received $50 in return, which he promptly brought back to the Love family farm for his mother and sister's benefit. Back in Davidson County, though, both Mahala and Sally Love were handling things fine on their own. One of Nate's uncles had moved into town and promised to look after the Love family matriarch and her only daughter. This afforded Nate with an opportunity to take his prized talents west, where he'd have more chances to find better work, escape the hostilities of Reconstruction in the South, and make a nice living for both himself and his future family. Nate Love's first major step on his westward journey was in Dodge City, Kansas. With only $30 or so left in his wallet, he was eager to scan the city for any and all work opportunities that fit his peculiar skill set. Upon arrival, Nate wandered around the Kansas railhead, where a herd of cattle and the responsible cowpunchers were residing. The crew hailed from the famous Texas Duval Ranch, located in the Palo Duro River of the Texas Panhandle. As the Cowboys were eating breakfast, Nate approached them, asking for the trail boss to inquire about work with the cattle drivers. The trail boss was quick to respond, offering Nate a job, but on one condition only: break the wildest horse belonging to the wranglers. Of course, neither the trail boss nor the rest of his outfit had a clue the task was right up Nate's alley. The future cowboy gladly accepted the challenge and was introduced to his equine adversary, Goodeye. Nate would later remark the breaking of Goodeye was his fiercest and most demanding ride of his life. The trail boss wasn't kidding when he said it would show Nate's true character. Luckily for him, his character was that of steel-strengthened courage, and he secured a job at the Duval Ranch for a salary of $30 a month. While on the ranch, Nate settled nicely into his newfound role as a cowboy in the Old West. He learned to hone his driving skills, taking his farming knowledge and applying it on a much larger scale. Before long, he became the premier ranch hand in all of the Texas Panhandle. And at one point, Nate was given a .45 revolver that he would use to practice his shooting skills. Like all of his other cowboy talents, shooting came natural to Nate, and he was considered a real marksman before his next assignment. Another undoubted skill of Nate Love's was his ability to strike a deal and buy the perfect cattle for Duval Ranch. After he learned to protect himself and make a name as a gunfighter, he traversed south to Mexico on multiple occasions. There, he would pick up the fluent Spanish-speaking abilities he had later in life, while leading various cattle purchases between the States and Central America. At the end of Nate's 3-year tour with the Duval Ranch Gang, he sought fresh opportunities deeper into the western frontier. In 1872, Nate moved to the Gallinger Ranch, found near the Gila River in central Arizona. While in Arizona, the burgeoning cowboy would continue to hone his skills while meeting larger-than-life Wild West icons, such as Pat Garrett and his greatest adversary, Billy the Kid. Gallinger Ranch is also where Nate met his first real test regarding the violent nature of the frontier. On multiple cattle driving excursions, he was met with hostility, whether it was bandits attempting to steal from his herd or bands of indigenous warriors attempting to raid the settlers. After 4 years in the Copper State, where he appropriately earned the nickname of Red River Dick, Nate Love felt it was time for another change. This time, he set his sights on the town of Deadwood, nestled within the Dakota Territory. After driving a prized herd of cattle up north, he arrived at the Deadwood railhead just as the 4th of July festivities were getting underway. According to his autobiography, it was on Independence Day of 1876 that he entered a rodeo, only to promptly win various contests. He stated the goal was to rope, throw, tie, bridle, saddle, and mount a Mustang as fast as possible. Of course, this was child's play for Nate, who saw the blue ribbon on his fringe jacket before the rodeo even started. The cowboy clocked in a time just under 9 minutes, with the closest competitor a full 3.5 minutes behind him. Next, Nate entered the shooting skills contest, needing to hit a rifle target of 250 yards and a pistol target at 150 yards. All 14 of his rifle shots struck the bullseye, with 10 out of his 12 pistol shots making perfect marks on the closer target. Once again, first place and the top records in all of the West were his to claim. Nate Love, now a fully fledged cowboy, walked away from the rodeo with $200 in prize money. Unfortunately, these claims are unsubstantiated, as the Deadwood newspapers that covered the 4th of July festivities never made mention of a rodeo or the aforementioned contests. That's not to say they didn't happen though, and as skilled as Nate was, he probably would have won them regardless. After his heroics on Independence Day, Nate Love, also known as Red River Dick, earned his third and most popular nickname, Deadwood Dick. The name was inspired by a dime novelist character invented by Edward Lytton Wheeler, a popular writer at the time. It didn't take long before Nate reminisced about his time down south in central Arizona, and departed Deadwood after the lingering intrigue of his rodeo exploits faded away. He was eager to drive cattle once more and partake in actual work as a cowpoke again. In October 1877, Nate nearly lost his life because of it. On what seemed like the typical autumnal day, collecting a few stray cattle grazing further down the Gila River, a small band of Pima Native Americans kidnapped the cowboy. He suffered multiple gunshot wounds and wasn't able to avoid capture. When he was brought back to the Pima encampment, though, his life was ultimately spared. It just so happened this band of the Pima were made up of various mixed identities, with a good portion of the tribe sharing both indigenous and African American roots. As a result, the tribe's chief and the rest of the Pima opted to keep Nate alive, out of complete respect for his heritage and his gunfighting skills. They nursed his wounds and restored his health, with the chief's daughter finding romantic interest in the lost cowboy. Nate even considered marrying the Pima woman, and the rest of the tribe supported the relationship and clamored for him to be adopted into their band. At the end of the day, though, Nate knew his heart was still in the cowboy life, and one night he stole a spare pony and rode all the way to West Texas, escaping from his short imprisonment and never looking back. Over the next decade or so, and into the mid-1880s, Nate continued dominating his field as both a cattleman and a gunfighter. Yet as time went on, the passion for cattle driving slowly faded, and as he aged, Nate knew it was about time to hang up his saddle and spurs for good. In 1889, Nate retired from cowboy life and married a woman by the name of Alice Owens. They wed on August 22nd in Denver, Colorado, where the couple called home for a few years. In 1890, Nate searched for easy, unskilled labor before becoming a Pullman porter. He helped shine shoes, carry luggage, and set up rooms on sleeper cars for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Over the next 25 years or so, life as a Pullman porter brought Nate and his family all over the western frontier. At various points in life, they called Wyoming, Nevada, and Utah home, before finally settling down on the beaches of Southern California in 1910. After finishing his career as a porter, Nate sought out work as a security guard and courier for the General Securities Company in Los Angeles. In 1920, Nate and Alice moved from Malibu to Santa Monica, where the couple would reside together for the remainder of Nate's life. On February 11, 1921, Nate Love died at the age of 66. He left behind him a lasting legacy, most famously described in his 1907 autobiography titled The Life and Adventures of Nate Love, better known in the cattle country as Deadwood Dick. While very little by the way of historical verification came to support the spellbinding accounts documented by Nate, the book was a smashing success, as folks of the day were eager to get their hands on any and all tales regarding the Wild West and the larger-than-life figures that made it so. Whether or not you believe Nate Love's life accounts to be fact or fiction, one thing is absolutely true. Surviving enslavement in the South and breaking free to chase dreams of being a cowboy on the frontier is a feat most anyone in history cannot claim. Regardless if there were shootouts besides the like of Billy the Kid, or daring escapes from warrior bands of Native Americans, the cowboy called Nate Love, or better yet Deadwood Dick, lived a full, if not exciting, 66 years on Earth, an accomplishment worth sharing with the world for years and years to come.